Gavel. So, call to order the Fairway Estates meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. All members of the board are present, council staff. The mayor is attending online, and there are various members of the public here. Our first item of business is a work session to discuss the Fairway Estates Special Recreation Improvement District annual budget for fiscal year 24. And I believe Ms. Steck will be presenting this one. Again, please excuse the issues we're having with the Zoom. We're working to try and fix that. Those who are attending online do have access to the slides. So board, if you can log into the Zoom on your computers, if you haven't already, you'll be able to see the slides that are being presented there. They just don't show up here in the room in person. It was not known until just now. All right, Ms. Stack.
I'm just going to give you a little background on Fairway Estates. It's a little known district, so to speak. So some facts about it. It was established on August 5th, 1986 by a resolution by the council. There are 56 residential parcels in this district. There's no commercial anything in the district. The total acreage is 7.97 acres, so just about 8 acres total. The assessed value in 2022 was $24.2 million for all the parcels or homes in that value in that area, and the taxable value became non-residential and therefore discounted. It was $13.3 million for 2022. We don't have 2023 assessments quite yet. The average lot size in this area is 0.14 acres, so it's very small lot sizes, and we believe that this area was established to provide that a larger area of open space so that they gain more density in the area. Average assessed value of the homes in the area is about $431,000, and the taxable value is $237,000. The average property tax paid is $182 a year. The services that we provide in the district is the maintenance of 3 separate park parcels in the neighborhood that equal about 1.23 acres. Parcels are actually owned by the district. We're good to go. The parcels that are the park parcels are actually owned by the district. And those parks are located in the center of the district and have no public benefits. They're part of a development agreement for increased density. The things that we pay out of the district funds is the landscape contractor, which is A to Z Landscaping at the time, water, electricity, and we charge no overhead for the management of the district. So any of the financial reporting, the budget, your meetings, any of that, we don't charge a dime of the overhead to the district, which we do to all the other districts. A little bit about the tax rate history for the district. It has been traditionally low. I could get back to 1997. That's about as far back as I was able to get. And at that time, they were paying about $107 a year for their property tax. There was a 67% rate increase in property tax in 2006 due to cost increases, and then a 1.5% increase in 2010. So that property tax rate has continued to decrease as property values have increased over time. So remember, there's there's a nexus between values and the rate. If the rate goes up, down, values go up. If the rate goes up, the values are down. So the purpose of this meeting was to be able to discuss some scenarios with you. As the budget has been proposed to you, it is not sufficient to maintain its reserves at its current level. Now, for many years, well, since I've been here, so 4 years that I know of, it has had reserves about 4 years worth of reserves, or sometimes 5 years worth of reserves in reserves. So 5 years of tax collections, that's plenty in a district, right? If you're using $10,000 a year to maintain it, $50,000 in reserves is great reserves. In essence, what happened and how those reserves got there is that the services were never being charged at the beginning. They were just collecting the tax and putting it in the district and not charging the services. So that reserve level got built. But this is the first year, though, that we have seen a stark increase in the maintenance contract, as well as the utilities that are being paid out of this district. It's almost double. In addition to that, that's not being held up by the property tax revenue. And therefore, at some point in time, we need to do a property tax increase to bring the revenue up to the service levels. There's different strategies that I gave you in some scenarios. These are not the only scenarios. You certainly can adjust them as you see fit. This year, we are not proposing a tax increase. We're proposing to continue to use those reserves until it becomes a time when they cannot sustain the services, and then to increase the tax rate. But it would mean a substantial tax rate. You could take a different approach and say, well, we're going to start increasing that tax rate a little bit at a time so that eventually we meet where we need to be without a dramatic increase in the tax rate. This is really a philosophy issue. If we want to say that we want, those reserves have been paid in there up to this point in time, so maybe they should be used to subsidize the services until such time as they can no longer do so. Or maybe you want that reserve rate to maintain itself in case there's we need to replace the sprinkler system, or we need to replace turf, or the residents ask for a playground to be installed in some of this green space, something like that. We could do that as well. So the scenarios have been put before you. They're very different. Scenario A kind of equalizes those increases starting with this next fiscal year, which is why we're coming before you now. Your proposed budget has 0. This scenario says we should increase the property tax rate by 25%, and kind of bring it up a little bit. See, we're still using reserves. You can see in that red, in that blue section, the red, that means we're using those reserves. So we're using about 1 year's worth of reserves if we were to do a 25% rate increase. We did another 25% the next year. Again, we're using almost 75% of reserves at that point. And you can just kind of see, we just keep 25%. And then in 2029, we can kind of taper that off and keep a 1 year or about a $10,000 reserve in there. That's one scenario. In all of the scenarios, I used the same minimum reserve value of $10,000 to $11,000. That was kind of my target. Would be to not do a property tax increase next year, but then to do a larger increase to get that revenue up a little bit, so 45%, and then to taper it down year by year. So 40%, 30%, 25%, 5%. Again, you can see those reserves. I'm trying to keep them right at about 10,000. Eventually, there is 1 year that it drops pretty low to $5,800. And then scenario C was the one where we say we're just going to use all the reserves until we can't use the reserves anymore. So that would be in 2026 estimated, where we would have to increase the property tax by 175%. So it's a dramatic increase. And then after that, after it gets to where it needs to be, then we can just do 5% a year for inflationary increases after that. You can see in each of these scenarios in the white section, the third line down, that per month, that will tell you kind of what their, and I want to call it an HOA fee, but it's their tenants, but it would be kind of like an HOA fee in essence for the maintenance of this area. It is lowest in scenario C, even though it's most dramatic in its acceleration. By the time that we have the same level of reserves, the rate per month for a taxpayer is lower than, say, a scenario A or a scenario B. So in a scenario A, the taxpayer in essence would be paying about $58 a month. In scenario B, it would be $52.50 a month. And in scenario C, it would be $48.25 a month. So again, these scenarios are just what I could put together based on the targets. But again, this is up to the board to decide what are the level of reserves that are appropriate for this fund, and how do you want to address not being able to provide services with tax dollars.
So which of the scenarios are in the proposed budget?
None of these scenarios are in the proposed budget because it's it doesn't have a 5-year plan. It only is next year. And there's
Zero.
zero.
So I just want to share that when this came before the budget committee, there was a 0 increase for this budget. And then and we were just a little uncomfortable with what was proposed. So we asked just to provide us with a few more options. So that's what's before us now, is a few more options to look at.
And again, that's the value of that budget and audit committee, is to have some of these discussions so that some of this information can come to you in a timely manner, and those decisions can be discussed.
I guess the other thing I just want to add, and then someone else can chime in, is what I've heard a lot from residents is if there has to be an increase, we prefer a smaller, consistent increase than a big one. So love to hear what the rest of you are thinking.
Couple of questions first. The contractors, the utilities, obviously, what is included in that utility cost? What are we paying for besides water?
I brought Mr. Astle here to talk about the service levels and what's needed in the area. He's the expert, so I'm going to turn a little bit over to him.
Denise, while he's coming up, just a quick clarification. We're assuming a 5% increase in utilities and contractor services costs. That's built into every share.
Yes, thank you for that question.
So in the area, there are two meter systems to manage the irrigation systems for these different parks. And then the power to maintain and operate those throughout the area. Those are the smaller the cost for this contract. The bigger portion is the day-to-day contract we have with the service provider to maintain the lawns. And then it's broken into two pieces. The first is that there's that set rate to maintain those parks. And then the second is they are responsible to do the repairs on the irrigation system because there's damage or needs there. So
When was the last time we competitively bid the contractor services for this?
We did that 4 years ago and we just renewed with them. The increase was around 4% this year for that service. And the contractor that we utilize actually is the state contract. They hold the state contract right now, which means they were the most competitive bid across all the DFC facilities. It's a 5-year contract. It could be 3 years and then they're in a 2-year extension.
I just wanted to make sure that we're going with the low responsible bid. And if they're on state contract, then they may not be the cheapest, but they're fairly cheap and fairly consistent. So
Well, I don't know where else you get a 4%. I still have a fundamental question on this, and I don't know who's the best person to answer it would be. But what makes this different from an HOA? You know, I mean, other than the board is the 7 of us and not actually people who live there. What makes this different?
The way it was structured when it was initially set.
Could it be unstructured and turn into an HOA?
It's very difficult to create an HOA after the fact. When the development already occurred, because you would have to get all.
and this one, we'd have to have the homeowners to probably dissolve it. We as a board can't dissolve. This,
I would think we would have to actually, because we are the board for this.
right, but we can't dissolve this district. It would be left up to the 56 homeowners to decide if they want, but the difficulty is that the district owns the property. And that means that we would have to transfer the property to the city, and the city would have to step up and maintain the property.
Right, or turn around and sell it to an HOA. If they want. I'm just throwing a hypothetical, unless it's feasible or if possible, I'm just thinking out loud as to why this is so different. We have so many HOAs throughout the city that have property just like this, the little parks have just like this. They maintain it through their HOA fees, just like this. And yet here we are as a city taxing them. You know,
Well, we could do, what you could do, propose would be to transfer the property into the city's name, since they're both tax exempt entities or
Right,
taxing
we can
authorities.
sell it to ourselves.
You
Right?
can sell it to yourself, and then you could have an agreement with the HOA that, yes, we own the property, similar to what we've talked about in some of the other areas that are gonna develop in the city. But they have to maintain the property and pay for maintenance of the property, and they would have to put an HOA together to do that.
Just thinking out loud. I don't know why this is so silly.
Somebody did it in 1986.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, it eliminated it. If you think about it in one perspective, it eliminated an HOA that included a whole bunch of funky CCNRs. The taxing district is responsible for the parks and the park irrigation, and that's what they're responsible for. So it's kind of a,
Well, it also made your HOA fees tax exempt.
or at least tax deductible,
Okay, that's what I meant, not exempt, tax deductible. Thank you.
because it became a tax and not a. So somebody was looking at some things back in 1986. I think we're
The evolutionary ancestor of a PID.
something. I think we're stuck with it. Personally, I think we're stuck.
Or until we're not.
Yeah, but that's true. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting that the scenario that has the 175% property tax increase actually at the end of 5 years has the lowest monthly payment. I think that's interesting. My philosophy on this is before we make a decision, there's only 56 houses in this neighborhood. Right? It should not be difficult for us to do some sort of community outreach, whether it's they have a park, so we could have a meeting in the park if the weather would get good. We could have a meeting in one of the local parks. We could easily distribute a flyer across 56 homes, or we could spend a Saturday and some of us could go out and knock on doors. Between 5 or 6 of us knocking on doors, we'd have it knocked out. But I think somewhere along the line, I would like to have some sort of community outreach with the 56 property owners in the neighborhood to discuss that with them and not make this decision in a vacuum. That's my thought.
I agree with that 100%. You can't make decisions on, there's only 56 homes, and making decisions on people's properties without talking to them is a little backwards. We're supposed to serve them.
And I agree with council or board member Whitelock's philosophy that most people want incremental tax increases, and that's what we've talked about. But the interesting thing is that the incremental tax increase actually ends up being higher. And so I just want to talk to them.
Well, it is but being higher at a certain point, but overall it's not higher.
Overall, you're collecting the same amount of money. It's just a matter of when you
Yeah.
collect.
Yeah,
It's like a big chunk of it now, you don't need to worry about it all.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But I also am in favor of doing some kind of community outreach. I'm happy to, if we as a body decide we want to hold something there or here, I can certainly pass out flyers in that neighborhood for a morning walk.
We could have a public hearing. Oh, wait, we do that. Nobody shows up.
They have to know about it though.
I'm pretty sure they're noticed by law that we're having a public hearing. Don't we have to notice them?
On this, yeah.
Do we notice them about?
Mr. Chandler, can you weigh in? Do we send a notice to them that we're doing these meetings?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if we do on this one specifically to the members.
We did a public hearing.
Right, but we have public hearings all the time, but unless they're paying attention.
Right, unless they're paying attention to their district, you're right.
If they're not getting any, if they're not, what, it's not,
And the
if they're not
only,
getting any notices, if their homes are on their streets that say they're doing this, it's gonna affect them, how are they gonna know?
and the only way they would get a notice is if we decide to do a tax increase this year, then we would have to go to truth in taxation. And then they would get the truth in taxation notice and we'd hold the hearing in August. But I'd prefer to talk to them long before August, and you know what I mean?
So really, yeah, you're correct. The decision that will need to be made by June 14th is whether you want to go into truth and taxation this year or whether you want to continue to engage the community and go with 0 this year and then do a tax increase the next year. So you have some time to continue this discussion or to do some community outreach. Just knowing that that decision needs to be made by that June 14th date.
Personally, yes, I think the community outreach is never a bad idea. I think it's a good idea, especially on such a concentrated area like this. It's not a bad idea. That said, I would hate to have like 3 people show up and think that those 3 people are representative of all 56 opinions. Because that happens way too often. The squeaky wheel gets the grease and they come in and say, no, don't you dare raise anything. And then we don't do anything and it kicks the can down the road and nothing ever happens. So I wouldn't want that to happen.
No, I think you're right, but I think we need to do a multifaceted approach. Is maybe what we can do is we can hold a hearing or a meeting there with the flyer. The flyer has something that says, take this survey at, and do a survey that's on the flyer and a couple of those kind of things so that we've at least made an attempt to get as many people. And it may take, after we do that, maybe it takes just a day or a night to go knock on some doors that we haven't seen people and just go talk to them and ask them.
And the other side of that that I'm thinking as well is it is a philosophical decision, right? It's a policy decision at the end of the day, because every person is going to show up to a public hearing. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. We should definitely do it. I think we have to do a public hearing anyway, or 2 or 3. That needs to happen. We need the input, but at the end of the day, we need to decide on a policy that's going to make the most sense. Because everybody who comes in a public hearing, like we've had it before, right, where we've discussed a property tax increase for the general fund, and all the people who work for the city who says, oh, that means a raise for me, come and say, oh yes, I'm in favor of that. And all the people who are in the city who don't work for the city come and say, no, I'm opposed to that, because everybody comes in conflict with their own interest and mind a little bit. Some are going to say, well, I'm going to sell my house within the next 2 years, so I want the one that doesn't increase the rate for the next 2 years and then has the big increase after that. And others are going to say, well, I'm going to leave this house to my kids, so I'm planning for the long term, so I'm going to do it this way. So you know what I mean? Everybody's got opinions, but as a policy, we need to set the policy. We need to decide what makes the most sense, what's the fairest among everybody, and weigh that out and kind of decide that. And I would like to discuss the scenarios on the table, like what's not on the table while we're here. Maybe a combination of the, I really like the combination of the and C personally. So, which I know B is, but and we can check that out. And what I'm thinking is I just don't want to hold this hostage to the 2 people that will show up and say, oh, I think we should.
And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the residents. I'm going to give the residents more credit than just saying, no, I don't want a property tax increase. I think if we have an honest discussion with them and maybe there are some different scenarios, because, our board member, Jacob, you may be right. It may be that it's an incremental, it's not a 25% increase this year. It may only be 10% this year and 10% next year with a 150 jump instead of a 175, and we can play with those numbers. But I think that the residents in the area, I think if we explain it to them correctly, say, look, we're looking for a long-term, this is what's going to happen in your neighborhood over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. What's the, and see if we can talk to them about the long term, but I think we can get at least some decent input on that. That's just more than no to a tax increase, yes to a tax increase, those kind of things. And I think they can help us make that policy. I think they can help us make that policy. But I'm not averse to talking about this tonight. And looking at some things. I just want to make sure that we're not making that. I'm going to say this. We make enough decisions in a vacuum anyway, because Chad Lamb sits back there and never says anything. I just had to get you, Chad. You know,
You had your chance.
we made decisions in minimal vacuums, like you say, with 1 or 2 people. And I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that we make a good decision that includes the neighborhood with a good long-term long-term prospect, so we know what we're doing in this neighborhood.
Board Member Worthing, were you going to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far in discussions on names until we get some feedback from the neighborhood, from the people that live there. I would like to know what their opinions are. I'd like to know what they think. I disagree that it'll only be 2 or 3 people. I don't think you do things, and I don't think you do things in people's backyard without having a discussion first. Let's put it that way. So let's have a discussion, or at least give them the opportunity. Yeah, that was sarcasm.
Mr. Anderson, can you put the slides back up with the different options real quick? I mean, we've got the you decide slide that's up right now. I just want to back up to, okay, there we go. So scenario A, anticipating 25% for this coming year. There's the impact. Let's go to scenario B, which is nothing for this year, and then the 45, 40, 30 kind of a descending. And then scenario C was 0 for a couple of years, and then 26, 175% by inflationary adjustments. I would be in favor, can you back up to A? I would be in favor with proceeding as if we're going to go down the route for scenario A and noticing the public hearing saying this is what we're going to do, because that gives us plenty of time. I think if we wait until we talk to them before we set a course, I don't think we're going to be able to do anything this year. And by default, this year is going to be a 0, and that might not necessarily be what they want. So if we set it at the max and say, we think we're going to say 25%, we can always scale it down. We can always say we're not going to do anything. This buys us time. It helps us make the decision for June 14th, saying yes, in August, we want to have a public hearing. We have opportunity to hold maybe 1 or 2 meetings out there with the folks to get their thoughts before we actually take any action, but we give them sort of a worst case scenario. This is what it would look like, but before we finalize anything, what do you guys want to hear? Worst case scenario, meaning we wouldn't be able to go, if we said 25% for 2024, and that's what we noticed, we can't go above that 25% when we adopt the budget in August. So that would be my thought. I agree with what's been said about meeting with the residents. I agree with what's been said about making a decision. I agree with what's been said about not making decisions about people's backyards without speaking to them. So I would say let's throw it out there with scenario A, and then get a couple meetings planned, both here with our regular council meetings. We can have another public hearing there, but we can also do town halls out there. We've had, I felt like a significant amount of success having town halls out in people's neighborhoods. I remember we had quite a few people show up at Constitution Park when we talked to everybody about what was going on with stormwater. We've had a lot of folks show up for other other events that are right out there. And if we meet in their backyard, I think we'll have some good response. So I would be in favor for setting the course for scenario A. However, I am 0% committed to scenario A. I just want to make that very, very clear. I really do want to hear from them. But it gives us the most flexibility when we have the conversations and gives us the element of time on our side rather than pushing it off till next year where it could perhaps get forgotten. If we don't take some sort of action now, we'll say, well, if we're not doing anything this year, let's wait till August, let's wait till September, then it's winter. Well, let's not meet in their yards right now. We have a late, I mean, this is the soonest this year we're going to want to do something outside with the, so we might as well run now. Anyway, thoughts, that's just bites.
Another scenario is for a starting point as well. For this year, it's the only one that has a potential smaller increase for this year. So I agree, if we're going to go down the truth and taxation route, the scenario A is a good place to start. I think when it comes to make the motion on that, I don't know if 25% will be the right number or not, but it'll be the right. I think it's the right place to start today and say we're going to go that route. And it also keeps us the smallest in the red. The net change numbers are in the red the least on scenario A, with the exception of year 2, which is slightly smaller in scenario B. But you know, yeah, I like what you just said. And just to be clear, I'm not against getting citizen input. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a policy decision eventually the 7 of us are going to have to make, regardless of if we get 53 voices or if we get 30 voices.
Or 4 people per household, 200 voices.
Right. Good shit.
So I agree that it is ultimately up to us. That's what we were voted to do, but we were also voted to be the mouthpiece for the residents. So it would be helpful to hear what those that live there that want to share with us what they have to say. So I'm very much in favor of that. Although sitting next to Ms. Worthen that feels we should always have cake, I was just going to suggest she's in charge of cupcakes and I'll bring water.
Second.
Well, that may be the way that we attract people into the public meeting, is tell them we're gonna have, we've got cupcakes and ice cream and, fat daddy.
This
fat
from the
daddy
person that said, if I do those legislative meetings for PTA, I will not serve punch and cookies.
Why do you think people are forward to me coming? Bring food.
I think I understand where you're going, is that if we said we're gonna go down, if we talk about going down the path of scenario A now, that puts us on a road of truth and taxation that gives us the maximum amount of flexibility in the budgeting process, includes an extra public hearing, which would help us. We do one on the front end, we do one on the back end. And so
Town halls in the middle.
Town halls, that's what I mean, town halls in the middle. I'm okay with that. We may end up, I'm wondering if what we shouldn't do is if when we start with scenario A and we have that as a spreadsheet, and when we're talking to residents, we can plug numbers in and say, well, okay, you don't want a bigger tax, you only want 17% this year, what it would do across the board. We could play with those kind of numbers. But to start with scenario A, I'm good with that.
Did you have something else? All right. So I guess the question for Ms. Steck, do you have enough of a pulse from the council as to the board, as to how we'd like to proceed? Does that give you what you need?
It does. So we're going to reach out to the tentative budget since it's adopted. We'll do that. I'll bring it to the board June 14th, along with the public hearing. So you'll have the first public hearing that we already said we were going to have a public hearing. And you will also have, oh no, not this one. This one is June 14th.
Oh, that's right. RDA and MBA.
And we will have the tax rate by then, and with those exact numbers. I can also provide you a spreadsheet that you can plug in the numbers and it will do all the work for you. So I'll just put in yellow what those numbers are and you can play with that spreadsheet all you like. And yes, then we will head down the road towards truth and taxation for the district. And I believe that you're right. It will give you the most opportunity. You can go to 0. You can go to 17%, go to 25%, you can go to whatever it is, right? But it does give you that flexibility to have public noticing through not just our outreach, but also through that property tax notice that they'll get in the mail. And that will start some conversations as well.
In addition to, sorry, board member Whitelock, then I'll chime in.
With that spreadsheet, I think that we could allow residents.
Going back to one of board member Jacob's earlier comments, I wonder if we might also want to talk about some of the options for the long-term future of the district. Might be worth, if there's a list of pros and cons, that here's if you remain with the city, here's if you can get unanimity to form an HOA instead. Just a thought, something. If there's an opportunity to share a little bit more information and get a little bit more feel from the residents, a broader perspective of where they'd like to see things go. If we're already meeting with them, might not be a bad idea to throw that in.
If we're gonna do that, then there's a third thing that I would like to add. And that is that in our ordinance, we have not enacted the administrative control board for that district since 1986, and that's why the 7 of us are making the decision. We could actually ask the residents if they want to fill the 7 board positions and they're in charge of their own neighborhood with their rent and follow the ordinance where they're the administrative control board of that particular district. And that may be a question that we want to ask them as well as, do you want us or do you want 7 of your neighbors to make that decision? And we do that based on the ordinance that we have.
Because the district is so tightly connected with the city, I would be very curious to hear from legal the potential ramifications of that. If something were to happen and they were to say, you know, let's not have any increase at all, in fact, let's drop it. Is there potential that something could come back to the city and the city could end up with some liability somewhere? I'm sure this is something that Josh wouldn't be able to answer off the top of his head, but I'd be very curious in pursuing that, but I would like to know what the city's exposure might be. And not to put you on the spot, but later in time.
And then, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not in a position to answer that question right now, but I would be happy to look into that. Something.
And at the end of the day, they would be the board, but the professional staff like Denise would still support the board. And by Utah Constitution, they can't deficit spend. So they would have to deal with the budget. But you know, all I'm suggesting is that if we're looking at Fairway Estates, we look at it holistically and we look at the ordinance that we haven't adopted since 1986, and you know that may you know, just as we're talking with neighbors and residents in the area, that may be something we want to talk about.
As well, how many needs to be on board? Because 7 seems like a lot for 56 homes.
55.
That's more than 10% of participation. That's unusual for that many people be interested in getting the HOA. But it could be 3 or 5. I don't know.
Right. Any other elements of discussion for this particular agency meeting? Board member Pack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, great discussion. Thank you. I always love listening to what everyone has to say. I also feel I should probably chime in so that you know, people know where I stand as well. I've always been a proponent of not kicking the can of fees down the road. while also noting if there's a plan in place, it might not necessarily be punting it or kicking it. I had written down the same notes that board member Green articulated. It's compelling to note that scenario C is ultimately the lowest cost increase when you get down the road 5 or 7 years, whereas A is more upfront. So I'd be more in the middle road of a B. How about an A minus, a B plus? With community input, I feel that's always the best way. We are elected to represent the citizenry while they want to make known what they would like us to do. So I like that meeting in the middle of less big of a jump and later less pay if it's an amalgamation of A and C. Again, that's just a starting point. So definitely let's talk to the community so that we don't kick the can down the road, but also we don't jump the gun and acting before we gain input. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Mr. Anderson, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we also have the option as the city to use Qualtrics, do door hangers, if you want something that's quicker, since we're kind of under that timeline, we're a month away before need to make a decision, just different options.
Well, it sounds like the consensus is proceed with the truth and taxation route, so it lengthens out that timeline to August for us. So, but I think we'll use every method possible. Appreciate the thought there. Any other comments before we move to adjourn this meeting?
I just pushed the button to move to adjourn the Fairway Estates board meeting.
Second. As far as discussion of the motion goes, since we don't have the audio working appropriately with the Zoom, I do want to make you aware, I received a text message from the mayor saying that let's go ahead and skip the video that goes along with the introduction or with the receipt of the budget tonight. We can do that part tomorrow. So I would suggest that after we adjourn this one, we reconvene city council so we can close that out, and then the remainder of the evening will be already in. So any other discussion to the motion to adjourn? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we stand adjourned. And do I need to do anything to reconvene city council or tech?
If you can